Raymond Lyman. Mrs. Catelli, 2 weeks ago, my friend Max and I wrote 2 letters, 5-page letters, one to the Federal Attorney General and one to the ACLU about this mayor and the city council, 4 of these city council members, violation of civil rights. Not Mrs. Evans, but the other 4. You took our rights away with this ridiculous 4 minutes, fighting with people, not giving us answers, and telling people you're out of order. Ridiculous. I'm waiting for a response for the Federal Attorney General and the ACLU. And once I get that, I'm going to find out what to do with the Federal Attorney General. And then I'm going to talk to my lawyer about possible. Every time I come up here, you always saying I'm out of order. Well, I'm going to think about suing the city about that. Violation of my civil rights. Because I think it's kind of ridiculous. Now, I want to ask a few questions. Mrs. Catelli, you said a couple of weeks ago, now I don't want you screaming and hollering at me, but I tape every meeting since the city council started. But you said now that your husband wasn't running for office.
Oh.
But in the newspaper...
My husband, you can call my husband and ask him, okay?
Oh, I talked to your husband.
Yeah, we'll call him and ask him. I have nothing to do with his decision.
Your husband said if I wrote... Okay, wait, Mrs. Catelli. If I wrote on his petition that my street could have got plowed...
You're a liar.
I'm not a liar.
Your husband doesn't even know you.
He didn't know who I was.
Ask you.
He did not know who I was, Mrs.
You're
Catelli.
lying. Please.
Once he knew my name, he didn't want my name on his petition.
Oh.
Mrs. Catelli. Once he knew who I was...
Mr. Lyman.
You calling me a liar?
I'm calling you a liar.
Well, you could call me a liar what you want, but he wanted my name on his petition when he was running.
Very inappropriate to say those
Well,
things.
you could say that. But he said if I had his name on his petition, I could have my street plowed and Capalus Avenue paved.
So Mrs. Catelli's ridiculous. And I'm Phil Hardy, by the way. And this is kind of a snapshot of what is a little bit of the absurdity of local politics. All right, so I've been interested in local politics for about 10 years, and my involvement extends to directly interest in Winfield politics, which is where I live. Winfield's a village of about 10,000 people, and when my wife and I moved to Winfield in 2007, I sort of slowly became aware of what was happening in our town and how hostile and volatile our local politics were. And sort of as time unfolded, I started volunteering my time, which I would recommend. So I volunteered for a communications commission that I'm still on today. I've been on for 6 or 7 years and helped them design their newsletter and their banners. I helped this guy, Carl Sorgatz, run a local campaign 2 years ago, a nonpartisan campaign 2 years ago. And the idea of putting Winfield first, that was our tagline we came up with together. You can go to putwinfieldfirst.com if you want to see the cool website we built. So I've been pretty deeply involved in Winfield politics for a long time, and it really interests me and is something I have research interests in. So what I'd like to do today is really just give you a really broad landscape view of local politics, because my guess is that most of your students, do you guys take a state and local class here? So I teach a state and local class down the road at Benedictine, and I thought it would be worthwhile to kind of focus on this because we understandably have had so much focus on President Trump, what's happening in Congress, all the national stuff, even things in Springfield, not so much with local politics. So I thought I'd start with a quiz. 6,963. Anyone want to guess what that is? 6,963.
Units of local government in Illinois.
6,963 units of local government in Illinois. So we have a lot of them. We actually have the most in the country. And one of the things that Governor Rauner has talked about pretty consistently is the consolidation of those units because it makes us very inefficient and less competitive with our surrounding states. So what is local government? What does that number represent? It represents a wicked web, as I call it, of counties, municipalities, which includes cities and villages, and something most people don't think of as units of government, but what are called special districts. So actually your library board, your park district board, your forest preserve district board, those are all special districts, and they're basically quasi-independent units of government. So we have a lot of government in Illinois, and as a result of that, we have a lot of elections. 69, 63 total units, 102 counties, almost 1,300 municipalities, almost, 1,400 plus townships, more than 900 school districts, totaling about 4132 in special districts in our state. So we have a lot going on, which means we vote a lot, and as hopefully you've been trained by your excellent professors, the degree of involvement in voting varies quite a lot as you move down ballot and when you have local elections. So what else do we see? What interests me in particular about local government, and specifically Winfield, is that we see all of the ingredients or characteristics that we see at the state or national level. We actually have social media presence. The guy on the left is a gentleman named Tim Allen who ran a really pretty forceful Winfield website called Winfield 411, and he posted articles multiple times a day, very critical of our village board, eventually ran for village board as a sort of throw all the bums out kind of perspective. We've had a variety of newspapers in our small town, which newspapers in general are threatened, but at the local level it's very hard to keep them going and inform the public properly. We even have interest groups in Winfield, and believe it or not, we have very expensive elections. And I would say this is probably typical of a lot of local governments around our state. So wherever you live, you probably have people that are working very hard and involved in these processes that can be extremely nasty, and they don't make any money. So the people that serve on these boards, they might get paid an annual stipend, but for the most part, they don't get paid, right? So as you can see from the clip, sometimes the setting can be pretty uncomfortable for them. You calling me a liar. So this ain't Washington, D.C. Those of us that study media at the national level know that the unfortunate focus is on what the president's doing, and it gives the public the impression that presidents solve everything. And so rather than being a congressionally centric system that focuses on what our House members and our senators are doing, we think presidents do everything, so it's not a coincidence then that I made the image of Capitol Hill really, really small, because the public, our turnout goes up much higher in presidential elections than it drops down in midterms, and it gets frighteningly low in local contests. The public just is not that interested in local politics or local government. So one of the things we see that's very obvious is that turnout, which was already low, has been declining in local elections for some time. Maybe 4 years ago, Cook County had turnout on a rainy election day of about 18%. And so this past local election cycle in April, we had turnout numbers that were at 14%. And so the big philosophical question is, do we really have democracy when that's happening? When 80+% of people are staying home and not participating and not knowing who their elected officials are. That's a very dangerous policy that, again, we are sort of positioned to be in, and we focus so much of our attention on Washington, D.C., when the real action, the really important stuff also occurs here locally. Fewer people are running for office, so there's less interest for people to be involved. And there's probably something like a YouTube effect here where you watch a video that looks humorous, but then you hear the guy making claims about an elected official's husband or spouse, and you don't really want to get involved yourself. So fewer and fewer people are running, and you have uncontested elections where people don't have challengers. Another problem for democracy. An article from April 3rd in the Daily Herald titled, "Are There Enough Candidates to Do the Job in Your Town?" It was a 3-piece profile that they did right around the general election in April. And I put this up for a couple of reasons. One, it's very relevant for the talk. Two, the fantastic young lady that interviewed me for 45 minutes didn't put a single quote from me in the articles. So I'll never do an interview with Daily Herald. No, I would interview with them in a minute because I like getting interviewed like most political scientists do. And then the picture here is of the former mayor of Winfield, Deborah Barutis, who is a friend of mine. And when I was first getting involved in Winfield politics and observing it, I got to know Mayor Barutis a little bit. And she underwent really hostile things throughout her term. She served for 4 years and then decided, there's no way I'm doing this again. And so she experienced quite a bit of harassment, phone calls, things on Facebook, things in social media, volatile emails, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you watched village board meetings, you would see what I think was acute sexism by a lot of men directed at her. And so it was a really uncomfortable environment, twice a month, running these meetings in a setting that wasn't the healthiest. One of the things that we would like broadly in local government is a sense of good government and transparency. And so people that follow these things know that you'll hear these terms get thrown around like Open Meetings Act violations. Lyle had some concerns about that recently. People filing FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests. Watchdog groups popping up and trying to promote good government, but maybe sometimes not having all their facts straight. Opportunities for public comments. The gentleman in New Jersey we were giggling about earlier has every right, according to law, to deliver public comments. In their case, they allow 4 minutes. And so if the person's saying things twice a month during public comments that are not terrific, you kind of have to put up with it unless they cross some sort of line. You can't really prevent them from speaking. And then lastly, we would expect video recordings and minutes of meetings. So the tools are there for the public to learn a lot about local government, but many of us don't have the time or the interest really to do it, and that's unfortunate. Budgets, taxes, and neighbors. Another ingredient that makes local politics really nasty sometimes is, as you can see, this is from Reboot Illinois. The earlier slide was from governing the states and localities. I'm sorry for not putting that up there. But you can see that from 2004 to 2014, household income dropped 7% in the state. Home values dropped 20% in the state. Income taxes went up 92% in the state. Property taxes went up 11% in the state, and state spending went up 12%. So we have all these things that make our fiscal environment really nasty as well, and it frustrates property owners in particular. Renters too, but people who own property expect a lot out of their government, and they don't necessarily understand, for example, that most of their property taxes go to pay for public education, which go to the school districts, which are special districts, and the municipal government really has no say in what those school districts are doing. We see personalities, like the guy whose clip we saw earlier. Sometimes we see conflict, nastiness that's really unsettling, foul language, physical threats. In Winfield alone, we've seen quite a few of them. Things are better now, but 2 or 3 years ago, things were especially heated, and it made the whole town really uncomfortable. And if you're not familiar with what happened in Dixon, Illinois, this is their treasurer, and she was convicted of stealing $53 million and was convicted, this is a small town, was convicted of stealing are you from Dixon? Yeah, you're like, woo, Dixon. Somebody here from New Jersey is like, that's my cousin, man. It's not, I'm just saying. And so Dixon, residents of Dixon were paying taxes to what they thought were, correct me if I'm wrong, like an updated sewer system and a public pool. And after about 15 years of paying into that, people finally started to go, you know, one of these days they're going to build that pool. And then a watchdog group, I think, or the press even started digging around and realized she had been funneling all this money to pay for exotic horses, exotic breed horses. So there are other clips I could show you, I think. My preference would be that it not be about a food fight, but more like mud wrestling, right? This is not meant to be a flattering image, right, of that we can be very childish in our local politics. So should the title be food fights or mud wrestling? Either way, the point is that it's hostile. A lot of us aren't paying attention, but it's really important. And with that, I would ask questions, but I suppose you'll tweet them to me. I'm sorry, yeah, so thank you.